Good evening. You are at the right place if you are here for the Funding Your Farm workshop. So we'll get started in just a moment or two. Thank you everyone for being here. And we had about 70 people register and I see folks trickling in already. So that's wonderful. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. We're probably going to get started here soon because there's a lot of information that we definitely want to cover and have time to answer everyone's questions at the end. We hope that wherever you are dialing in from, it has rained and it is not too hot, and that your plants are growing beautifully inside or outside. I know we've been hearing from everyone, it's definitely been a struggle this summer. All right. We already have quite a few people in the room, so why don't we go ahead and get started? So first of all, thank you again for being here tonight. My name is Anna Withers, and I'm the Farmer and Resource Development Manager for Springfield Community Gardens. And we are a nonprofit based in Springfield, Missouri, whose vision is a community where everyone has access to healthy local food. We currently support 17 community gardens and 3 farm incubator sites, including supporting beginning and experienced farmers through hands-on experiences, as well as workshops like these. And this workshop on funding your farm is generously supported by the 2501 program from the USDA's Office of Partnerships and Public Engagement. We're super excited to offer this workshop because it's a very relevant topic. We support, like I said, local farmers, and it's a crucial part of SCG's work to help connect people with the education they need, the funding opportunities that they need to help us all create a more resilient food system. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we do get started. Please feel free to ask your questions as we go by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We're going to answer what we can as we go, but there will be time at the end to answer anything that we didn't get to. But please be sure to use the Q&A for direct questions, and then we'll leave the chat feature for comments. That'll help me keep track of questions throughout the night, and I'll be adding links to different resources into the chat, so that'll just help us keep everything separate and clean. After you leave the workshop, a screen will pop up with a link to a post-workshop survey, and that's used in our reporting to the USDA, and it also helps us provide meaningful workshops for you in the future. So we'd really appreciate it if you could take a few minutes at the end to fill that out after the workshop. Also, we are recording this workshop tonight, and if you'd like to refer back to it later, it will be posted to Springfield Community Gardens YouTube channel by the end of the week. So we are really delighted to offer this tonight. We're joined by 2 amazing farmer advocates. Adam and Jennifer, would you mind saying a quick hello before we get started?
Hello, I really appreciate everyone attending.
Yes, hello, I'm really excited to be here and look forward to your questions and sharing information about funding your farm.
Thank you, thank you. So really quick, why are we here? We've had a lot of requests for workshops like these because getting started as a farmer can be really overwhelming, and very few people have all of the education and funding resources needed to get started right away. There's a lot of planning involved. You have to have access to land, money for infrastructure, equipment, seeds, livestock, and all of those can be major barriers. So, goal for tonight, we're going to learn about different funding opportunities for your farm. As we go, there will be lots of strategies that we share. And we hope that this gives you an understanding of the types of support that exist. So it can be a jumping off point for you to contact a certain agency or identify some programs that are relevant to you and your farm. So first, before we get started, I'm going to launch a quick poll so that we can see who is joining us tonight. So if you don't mind, go ahead It says it's launched, so let me know if we don't see anything on the screen. But we'd really like to know, how many people are operating a farm, how many years of farming experience do we have, where people are calling. All of that'll be helpful for us as we go along. Okay, we have the answers coming in. Adam and Jennifer, can you see those right now?
I can see the questions. Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
It says we can see them all, but we're not allowed to vote as panelists.
All good. Okay. It's looking like most people are not currently operating a farm. We have a lot of beginning farmers in the room, like 1 to 3 years. Some people experienced farmers with more than 11 years. Ooh, a pretty even split between rural and urban. Most people calling in from the Midwest. We could have guessed that, but people call in from all over. And a pretty wide selection of different sizes for farms. Either less than 5 acres or the other majority between 11 and 25. And a mix of specialty crop, livestock, certified naturally grown. Okay, so we have a lot of beginners here, a lot of people interested in starting a farm, it seems like. Yeah, very even rural urban split, which I find surprising. Okay, well, I hope this helps our presenters know who we're talking to a little bit. I'm going to end the poll now, so thank you everyone if you are able to get your answers in. We'll have one more later on, but that's really helpful for right now, so thank you. And without further ado, oh wait, I didn't share the results, sorry about that. Here we go. So most people not operating a farm, got lots of beginners. The Midwest has really shown up tonight. We like to see that. Okay, I'm going to hand it off to Jennifer.
Great, thank you so much, Anna. I appreciate it. And yeah, welcome everyone. So I'm glad to know who's in the room. That's super helpful. So I will just share a little bit about myself. My name is Jennifer Hashley, and I'm the director of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. We're based in Massachusetts. So we are a beginning farmer training program, and our mission is really to improve our local and regional food system by making sure that we have a well-educated, prepared workforce in agriculture moving forward, both as entrepreneurs and folks that want to be farm managers and other people that really help grow our food. And we want them to produce this food that is available to all of us, that's sustainable, nutritious, culturally appropriate. And as I said, we're located in Beverly, Massachusetts, which is in the northeastern corner north of Boston. We're in a pretty urban and suburban area as well, located on ancestral, traditional, and contemporary and unceded lands of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts people. So we operate 3 main programs at New Entry. We do a lot of farmer training program. That's our core work. We do courses and workshops on production planning. We do a farm business planning course, and we do outreach through our Explore Farming workshop to help people assess farming as a business. And once folks take our business planning course, they can access land on our incubator farm for up to 3 years. So folks can build their business, get started with a lot of access to infrastructure, resources, and technical assistance. And then the goal is that they launch their business and continue farming. We also support our farmers through our food hub work. So we aggregate and distribute the produce that folks grow. And we sell through a community supported agriculture program. About half the food goes to a CSA program, half goes to food access partnerships, and we do a little bit to farm to institution and other schools and dining services. And then we share our work through our national field network, which supports other incubator and apprenticeship training programs across the country. So excited to be here. And my job is to kind of set the stage for today. Again, we're going to kind of talk about a lot of different programs and resources. And I think since many of you are new, it's really important to understand the difference between grants and loans, which might sound obvious, but sometimes I think people assume that there's a lot of free money out there available for farmers or to start up a farm. And not always the case, but grants are something that you don't necessarily have to pay back. But a lot of the grant programs we may talk about, some of them are taxable as income to you as a farmer. So if you do end up applying for a grant and you get the money, you are usually subject to tax and would get a 1099 from that funding source. So something to keep in mind as you're looking at those opportunities. Oftentimes grants are very restrictive to doing certain activities or projects. So people don't generally just give away money to say, here, do what you want with it. There's a whole process where you need to be very specific about exactly what you're going to use the money for. A lot of times there are reporting requirements. They're usually competitive because other folks are applying for them as well. And so I'll talk about some strategies for making sure that your ideas really stand out and that you're more successful in a competition like that. But just being prepared to understand that there's often a lot of strings attached. It may be free, but there may be a lot of other requirements that come along with it. So those might be some considerations if you're going to think about grants versus getting a loan and being able to do what you need to do with the money. Some of the grant programs are also kind of considered incentive-based programs. So there could be programs you could apply for that may pay a certain rate for implementation of a project. So you have to do something in order to then be paid back for it. And sometimes those might require a cost share component or some matching funds is another term people use. A lot of times funders don't want to pay for the entire cost of something, especially in agriculture. They want to make sure you have some skin in the game and that you're going to obviously take care of whatever the practice or implement or equipment or other thing that you might be doing with the funds, and making sure that you meet the criteria before the funder may reimburse you for that too, which another factor is that these incentive-based programs may be cost reimbursable. You may have to pay for the whole thing up front, and then someone might verify that you actually did it. You report on it, and then you get reimbursed for it. So that might be a consideration with some of the programs that we talk about. Do you have the money up front to buy the thing or do the thing before the funding comes back to your bank account? And then obviously loans, you're borrowing money, you have to pay it back. Usually there's interest, and usually people don't give money out unless you pass some credit or risk assessment criteria so that they're confident that you have the ability to pay that back. So if there are any questions about definitions or differences between grants and loans and incentive-based programs, I'm sure Adam or myself can share more about that as we go along. So just to get us started, I wanted to make sure everybody also was really clear how a lot of the programs that we'll talk about, especially the federal programs, define what a beginning farmer or rancher is. Like, what is the criteria to be a beginning farmer or rancher? So USDA, there's a couple different definitions, but they're sort of similar. Really USDA defines a beginning farmer and rancher as those who have operated a farm or ranch for 10 years or less, either as a sole operator or with others who have operated a farm or ranch for 10 years or less. And then the Farm Service Agency also has a couple of other criteria for their loan programs. You haven't operated the farm for more than 10 years. You also don't own a farm or ranch that's greater than 30% of the average size farm in your county, as determined by the Census of Ag at the time your application is submitted, and that you meet all the eligibility requirements and that you substantially participate in the operation. So there may be a little other factors that they assess in terms of whether you're a beginning farmer or not. There's also some programs have set aside funding or prioritize or maybe have higher cost share amounts if you fit the criteria or definition of a socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. And so that is someone who has been, who is part of a group that might be subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice because of their identity as a member of a group without regard to their individual qualities. So some examples of socially disadvantaged groups are those listed here. If you're Black or African American, American Indian or Alaskan Native, Hispanic, Asian or Asian American, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. And one thing to note, some folks in the past have also, or some programs have a slightly broader definition. What we're going to be talking about tonight does not include gender as a factor around being socially disadvantaged farmer or rancher. So just keep that in mind. And if there are any questions about whether you fit into that category or not, let us know as we move along. There's also another category called limited resource farmer or rancher. Sometimes that might be an eligibility requirement as well. If you are someone with direct or indirect gross farm sales, not more than the current index value in each of the previous 2 years. And you would need to demonstrate that gross farm revenue through a Schedule F, which is how you would file your farm taxes. You also have to have a total household income at or below the national poverty level for a family of 4, or less than 50% of the county median household income. And there's an online self-determination tool that we can link to here. You can search for that will help you fill out a little assessment there. And so when you think about your total household income, if you're a beginning farmer and you're just starting out and you still have an off-farm job, or your spouse has an off-farm job, you may not qualify for the limited resource farmer or rancher definition. So just to keep that in mind. So I'm sorry this is really small, but I think you'll get a copy of the slides afterward. But this is really the meat of what I wanted to share in thinking about grants in particular. So loans, obviously, money you have to pay back. There's a lot of different places you can think about potentially, putting in a loan application for, and I know Adam will talk a lot about the FSA loans and other things like that. You could go to a local bank, a local farm credit organization, a credit union. Loans are a different beast, but a lot of times folks are really interested in where's the free money? Where's the money I can get to, help me start my farm that I don't have to pay back? So if you are interested in grant opportunities, one of the biggest things that I can say is obviously look for opportunities and funders that are aligned with the purpose that you are trying to achieve. So first of all, make sure that the funder you're looking at is going to fund the things that you want to do. And usually they put out a request for proposals or a request for applications. People use the acronym RFP, request for proposals, or request for applications, and RFA for the proposal guidelines. But it's really important, and I have this starred and emphasized, that you read that document. So that's really the instructions for the grant application. It always usually contains its purpose, what they fund, the deadline, who's eligible to apply, what you can and can't use the money for, how you have to apply, and how you're going to be scored or rated in terms of your ability to be successful in the application process. So if you just hear about something and you're like, oh, great, I'll do that. I would never suggest getting much farther until you read through it thoroughly and make sure that you're even eligible. There's nothing worse than spending a lot of time filling out applications or forms, and then it turns out you're not an eligible entity. So you've really wasted a lot of time and frustration and disappointment. And then, really thinking about, sometimes these grants take quite a bit of time. Do you have the time to meet the deadline? Oftentimes the sad part is you just find out about something and the grant's due next week or in 2 days. So do you have time to put together a quality application? And a lot of times, some of the grant programs, they come around on a particular cycle. So if you miss the deadline this year, you may be able to reapply or apply the next time the next grant cycle is due. It could be on a quarterly basis, a semi-annual basis, or an annual basis, or even further afield, depending on some grants that only come around every now and again. So if I can't emphasize it enough, I suggest people really follow the application's instructions to the letter. And if you're not really sure about something, or if something, sometimes not all requests for proposals are very well written, quite frankly. So if something is unclear, usually there's a point of contact or program officer that you can call and ask questions to, or an email that you can query and say, I don't really understand this. How am I supposed to think about this? And oftentimes they will answer your questions and help you think about it. They may or may not be able to give critical feedback. They may or may not be able to tell you your program, your idea is a good one or not. Sometimes people are very helpful. Sometimes they're not allowed to be too prescriptive or provide too much guidance in fairness for all applicants. If there are any webinars or educational sessions about the program, definitely attend them. Definitely check out any frequently asked questions on the website so that you can be as successful as possible. Again, write your application to meet the review criteria. Usually that is listed in a request for proposals, depending on who the funder is. Oftentimes they'll say, we are looking for these type of projects, or we're going to give you this many points for responding to this piece of the application. We're going to give you this many points for responding to this piece, and they will spell that out. If you don't actually talk about those criteria, then you may miss out on those points. You may be scored poorly and you may not be funded. So definitely don't ignore that piece of the request for proposals in your response. And being really clear about your project purpose, your goals and objectives is really important. Like you're basically writing a sales pitch to maybe a whole review committee, maybe an individual funder or a program that has very specific goals of what they're looking for to fund. And you have to make sure that you're presenting that to your, give your best foot forward and presenting that in the application process. So what you're trying to achieve should be pretty specific, measurable, realistic. If you can provide a timeline of when you're going to do this, when you're going to start, what the milestones are, research your costs. A lot of times, funders can see through things that you're just estimating or making up if you haven't gotten quotes, or if you're, making it too high. Those are things that people really look at and assess. Oftentimes the reviewers that come in for these grants are farmers themselves, and they know what's realistic and what's not. And so being really clear and realistic with your schedule and budget is pretty key. The piece about connecting the project to the past and the future, if you've got a lot of success in some areas, or you have, experienced grant management or, finishing projects, or you've gotten this far in your business development, make sure that you're explaining that you are capable and, confident and have done well, and then show how that this project or whatever you're proposing for the grant will help you be even more successful, and how you'll continue to be successful after the funding ends. Most funders want to know that whatever they're funding is going to be sustainable, that you have a track record. This is going to be an infusion of capital or cash or infrastructure that's going to help you get to the next level, and it's going to be well used after the project is over. So make sure that you can point to those things throughout your application. If your project is going to have community benefits, that is a huge thing to add to your application. A lot of these grants come from public dollars, they're, or philanthropic dollars. They're really there to make a difference and, invest in things that are going to have broader community benefits. So if you can include letters of support, if that's allowed in the application, that's always great to get folks, letters from partners or collaborators or other members of the community who value what you do, and show how that fits into the community goals or plans and or how it will serve the public. If you can provide graphics, great. Oftentimes reviewers are like, if you're not specific about where this is located, where's the area on this farm this thing is going to be implemented, if you can have a map or graphics or pictures, if those are allowed, that's really helpful to help the reviewers really understand what it is you're trying to do. This is like basic English 101, make sure you have somebody, read through your application. Do they understand what you're trying to do? Did you spell check? Is your spelling and grammar, your clarity, does it make sense? Can your, your partner, your neighbor, your grandmother read this and, say, yep, I get it. I get what you're trying to do. Because the quality of how you present yourself is an indicator of the reviewer's ability to invest in you. Like if you can write a clear application that's not full of mistakes or errors or misspellings, then they're going to feel more confident that you can manage the grant. I'm sure there's a lot of other things I could share there, but that's just a good list to start with. And my best advice is, if you don't succeed at first, try again. You're not going to get every grant that you apply for, and learn from that rejection. If somehow you don't get funded, if you can reach out to the program and say, well, how could I have done better? Like, where did I fall short? Where did I lose points? What didn't you understand about my proposal? And if they give you that time and feedback, that's really valuable information, because oftentimes, you might be able to apply again the next time, and you can better incorporate that feedback into your proposal. So some helpful documents to have, and I know Adam will get into this in more detail later. If you're going to apply for any of the federal programs that we're going to talk about, everything really starts with registering your farm with FSA and getting a farm track number. And Adam will go through that process. There's a nice little tip sheet here that FSA has about the steps to do that. But that's, really unlocks the key, the door to all these other programs. So that's step one. Other programs may require that you have a federal employer identification number and some kind of registered business status. You can do that online pretty easily. You should probably have some recent tax documents or financial statements, especially if you're going to be going after a loan. But even some grant programs really want to understand, like, are you a business? Have you filed as a business, your Schedule F as a farm? Federal grant applications usually require a DUNS number, and now they've actually moved to another universal government ID number. So that's another thing to look out for. What are those requirements? It's usually written in the request for proposals, what kind of things that you need. Anything that is required by the federal government should be free. To register your business, you should never have to pay for a registration to apply for a federal grant. There are definitely companies out there that will try to sneak you to a different URL and collect your money. So look out for that. Oftentimes, many of the programs require that you have proof of land tenure or security, especially if you're trying to put in infrastructure, conservation practices, or other things that have a longer life than that really impact the land, so that they make sure that, again, the sustainability question. So having a written document, a deed or a lease or MOU, something in writing that shows that you have control of the land and permission to carry out the project from the landowner if you don't own it, are usually pretty critical documents to have. And then having a comprehensive business plan, always a good idea. It may not be required in your application, but if you have one, it comes in handy to take elements from that as part of your application process. I realize this slide is very small. I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to say, because Adam will go through these in more detail, there are a lot of federal grant programs that do fund agriculture and farming related projects. So Farm Service Agency, this is the alphabet soup of agencies, but we'll learn about Farm Service Agency from Adam with their loan and loan guarantee programs. They also help facilitate crop insurance, natural disaster opportunities, different kinds of programs that we'll learn about from Adam. The Natural Resources Conservation Service, or NRCS, we'll talk about all these other programs, the environmental quality incentives, conservation stewardship, CRP, AMA, things that help with fencing, wells, energy, drainage, irrigation, lots of those things we'll go through in detail. There's also the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program. They provide grants to farmers to try sustainable agriculture practices on your farm. These are research grants, so they want you to make sure that you're doing something that is unique and novel and innovative. It can be something that someone else has already done and demonstrated, but you want to demonstrate it on your farm. But there usually is a component that shows that you've done your homework, you've researched the literature that's out there, you're adding value to trying what you're proposing to put forward in the grant, and that usually you have to need to have a farm advisor to be part of your project. It could be someone from Extension, it could be someone in the local ag community that has some credentials, but they are also really looking at making the farmer grant process more accessible to many more farmers. And then there's a bunch of rural development programs as well that you could look into, the value-added producer grants. There's some rural business development grants, energy, rural housing, storage facilities. There are a lot of rural development programs as well. And the USDA has recently come out with an urban agriculture and innovation production grant. So if you are an urban farmer, which many of you said that you were in the poll, there are both some planning grants and implementation grants. The fiscal year 22 RFA just closed in early August, but it's really helpful for folks that might be interested in applying to that in the future to read through the request for proposals. They don't generally change dramatically from year to year. They may change pretty, during a new farm bill program, but it's a good opportunity to look through those and become familiar with it so that you can start your application now or put your partnerships in place to be ready for the next deadline. And then I know that Anna's going to speak more about a lot of the Missouri State Department of Agriculture programs. I encourage folks to look at their website, looking at some of maybe the energy efficiency grants are for you, or the specialty crop grants. There's some food insecurity ag matching grants for school infrastructure, some urban ag grants, value-added programs, organic cost share programs, and many others that are listed on their website. Again, making sure that you are eligible, that you have enough experience, and that these programs are a good fit, maybe something for you to explore. And then there are other kind of nationally oriented farmer grants that might be of interest for folks to pay attention to. The National Young Farmer Coalition does put out farmer grants from time to time, so checking out their website. A lot of times they prioritize BIPOC farmer related grants. American Farmland Trust has a Brighter Future Grants program, which is national. They also have a Northeast focused one, again, targeted to minority farmers or BIPOC farmers. You can put your email address on their website to be notified of future grant opportunities. If you're a livestock farmer, and some of you said that you might be, there are also some other, Food Animal Concerns Trust farm grant programs for folks that's funded through the, ASPCA or the animal rights groups. And so they really want to help folks invest in practices that help improve animal husbandry practices. Organic Valley has a Farmers Advocating for Organic Farmer Grant program, and Farm Aid is another good resource. They have a hotline, a crisis hotline, a resource network with lots of great resources. And if you ever find yourself in a terrible disaster situation, sometimes they do make grants, disaster funds available to farmers. And there are many others. This is a nice guide. This USDA guide to federal programs was just updated in September 2020. If you want to have a one-stop shopping PDF of all the grant programs out there, this is a nice resource to pay attention to. There's a lot of great information in there. There's a link that I'm sure we'll share afterward around the SARE grant. So they put together a nice farmer-focused document on tips for writing good proposals to the SARE program. And then there's a web link here to all the Missouri Department of Ag programs. And then there are other groups out there that do offer grant application support services. So sometimes in different communities, conservation districts may have capacity to help farmers with grant writing assistance. There's an organization called SCORE, which is an association of retired business executives, and they do work with small businesses. Sometimes they could help you, potentially you could be matched with a volunteer to help you prepare a grant application, or at least review it. That might be a good person to have put another set of eyes on your application or your business plan to make sure that you're communicating well. A lot of the Farm Credit Council programs around the area, they also do grant writing support services. It may be fee for service, but they also can help folks access both loans and grant programs. And then there's a new online group called Farm Raise, and that's a fee for service project where they can also work with you to identify your needs and help you apply for different farmer grants that are available out there. So those are some resources. I've just little shameless self-promotion on our New Entry YouTube channel. We did a webinar earlier this year on funding your farm, and it was really focused on farmers sharing their stories. So we had 4 farmer presenters who all talked about how they access different funding sources and helped build their infrastructure on their farm over time. So that's available there, and we do have other resources on grants and USDA programs and interviews with farmers kind of sharing the process. So I will stop there and turn it over to Adam, unless we want to pause for questions at this time, but thank you all.
I think we are good for now. Please, people, definitely feel free to ask questions as we go. But Adam, why don't you go ahead and get started? Oh, Adam, you're still muted. There we go. Hang on one second. There we go.
Great. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Anna and Jennifer. Thank you for your knowledge and experience on enlightening everyone about this. I think we as panelists, as presenters, really appreciate you logging in tonight to listen to us because one of the purposes of the reason why we're here is because we want to help you. And so I know some of the things that we talk about, the acronyms that we talk about, some of the things that we talk about in government might sound Greek, but we will take the time to work with you, especially if you contact us as well. And so this is really the first step to work with you. And so we will, for sure, hopefully help you answer any questions that you might have, as well as get you the information that you need too. So with that said, again, I want to encourage you, just like what Anna said, feel free to write down any questions in the chat, and we can talk to them as well and answer them for you. If we can't do it tonight, we'll get back with you as well. So first off, can everyone see my screen here? As well? Look good? Okay, great. So again, my name is Adam Coulter. I'm a natural resource conservationist here in Southwest Missouri, and I work for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We are a non-regulatory agency here to work with you, to work with landowners on addressing conservation resource concerns on your property. And so we work with landowners that might have a quarter-acre lot all the way to thousands of acres. And so when it comes to land uses, it's very diversified. From urban areas to suburban areas to agricultural areas as well. And so because we do know, we can provide agriculture, you as a landowner, as an operator, can produce something even on a small amount of land and even on a larger amount of land as well. And again, that's what we're here for, is we're here to assist you on that. And so tonight, what I want to talk about is some of the programs that we have here in the federal government. And as I said before, some of it might be confusing, but we are here to help you understand those, as well as the practices that can be employed on your land. And so we'll talk about those and go through the slide here as well. So just real quickly here, of course, I work for the Department of the United States Department of Agriculture. We were established back in 1862. A lot of people don't realize that, but that was, during the Civil War that we were established. And we have two conservation agencies within the USDA. There's other ones as well, but the two that we'll be talking about tonight are, the Farm Service Agency and the NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. We were established back in the 1930s after the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl, which occurred 90 years ago, had such a great economic and environmental impact upon the United States, its economy, its natural resources, that the federal government had the foresight to say, we need to start addressing erosion problems and trying to conserve and sustain natural resources. And that's why we are here. And again, some of these agencies can be confusing, but we'll talk about them so we can break them up so they make more sense to you as well. So the first agency that I want to talk about is the Farm Service Agency. And basically what the Farm Service Agency does is they implement the National Farm Bill policy and a great portion of that Farm Bill policy. The Farm Bill is voted on by Congress and devised through Congress, and the president signs off on it. And that provides, a lot of the funding for a lot of programs like the school lunch program, the women and infant program as well, or child program, as well as partly, offices and ventures such as the NRCS and the Farm Service Agency. So the Farm Service Agency actually oversees commodity, disaster, and marketing programs when it comes to corn crops, when it comes to livestock, different things like that. That's what they work on. And so a lot of the established landowners throughout the United States work with the Farm Service Agency, but also, beginning farmers and socially disadvantaged farmers, historically underserved farmers, they're kind of the first place you want to go. And so I'll talk a little bit about this. The Farm Service Agency also administers credit and loan programs, and I'll expand upon that here in a little bit. And it's also important to remember, too, that the Farm Service Agency, as well as the Natural Resources Conservation Service, are located in multi-county field office service centers. So whatever your county is in the United States, in Missouri, more than likely your county or the county next door to you is going to have an office there for the Farm Service Agency and for the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So you can go personally into those offices to meet somebody and get assistance. As for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the NRCS for short, the agency that I work with, we provide free technical and conservation services. Okay, we're paid by your tax dollars, and so we are scientists here to help you make the land better, help you to help the land is what the slogan is. We work through a conservation planning process where we print off maps, we assess and inventory the resources on your land. We look at what your goals and objectives are, and we give you a list of recommendations of what can be done on your land to improve it. We also administer conservation programs. So these are financial programs that come through the Farm Bill. And I'll talk a little bit about those. And those are the programs that really, give you that incentive, that financial incentive to, again, implement these conservation practices, whether it might be a fence, a pasture management system, a high tunnel, agroforestry practices, things that I'll be talking about here in a little bit. So these are infrastructural and management conservation practices. And so this is really kind of the first stop you want to go to when it comes to making enhancements on your farm. And I'll talk about some of these infrastructural practices that can be utilized as well. But I want to kind of digress here and go back to the Farm Service Agency, okay? The Farm Service Agency has a lot of programs they administer. And again, we work with them in the same office. And so we, work side by side with them. We don't administer it, but they, we know them very well and what they work on as well. But the most important thing that you want to do as an operator, as a landowner, is you want to locate where your Farm Service Agency office is. And you can go to farmers.gov, which is a national website, and you can find out where that office is. It's best to make an appointment because sometimes these offices are pretty busy, and especially here in Southwest Missouri, where we've gone through a drought, they're working feverishly on different programs. And so it's hard for them to meet people that just walk in. So it's best to make an appointment, or I'd encourage you to do so. At the Farm Service Agency, as a beginning farmer, as a person that just bought new land, what you want to do is what the Farm Service Agency will do is they will assign your land a specific farm and tract number. What that is that's basically an agricultural address. And I should say all the information that is given to the government is, under lock and key. We don't share any of this information. Because there's thousands of Elm Streets or Maple Streets throughout the United States, every specific piece of land that is entered or worked with through one of these USDA programs has a specific farm and tract number. So the Springfield Community Gardens, some of their gardens have a specific farm and tract number. My property has a specific farm and tract number. So it's just a way to make things formalized, to understand and not get the paperwork messed up when it comes to working with land. So when you meet with the Farm Service Agency, you'll learn about different programs, okay? And throughout the United States, there's different programs. Some might be applicable to the Midwest, some might be applicable to the Northeast, some might be applicable to the Pacific Northwest. And so all these different programs are a little bit different, but the ones I'll be talking about here shortly are pretty much all generalized for the whole United States as well. So we'll be discussing some of these basic programs now. So one of the first ones I want to talk about are the funding opportunities that FSA offers for new farms and existing farms as well. So, and again, as I said before, I want to put this little caveat in here that it might be, it might vary based upon location, or eligibility requirements and so forth. But again, if you go to your nearest office, you'll learn more about it. So the first one is really farm ownership loans. And so the Farm Service Agency provides that, where they help producers become owner-operators of farms. And so again, as Jennifer talked about, this is money that you're borrowing from the government at a low interest rate, and then that you might eventually pay off in the future as well. So they do offer loans for people that want to own or operate a farm. There's also what we call farm operating loans. And these are loans that will help producers or owner operators pay for normal operating expenses. And what we mean by that is this would be equipment, okay? This might be farm implements or tractor implements, seed. as well, livestock feed, and much, much more. So there's a long list of what might be eligible for these farm operating loans in which you can get one. There's also microloans as well. And these are tailored towards small, underserved, beginning and veteran farmers. You know, this historically underserved farmers that Jennifer talked about as well. And so again, these microloans are very, very valuable too. And they're typically, you know, for a smaller amount as well. There's also youth loans that we don't really think about, okay? And these are tailored toward, you know, people between the ages of 10 and 20 years old. And so, you know, we do use some of these as well, because again, one of, you know, the things that we're trying to do here is that, you know, our agencies, you know, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, the Farm Service Agency, you know, over the last 30 years of the Farm Bill, we've worked with a lot of the established farming operations throughout the United States. But, you know, we're seeing those either break up because they're being sold. We're seeing new farmers, and that's what we want. Is we want a new generation of farmers, whether you might be 60 years old and just recently retired, or if you're 20 years old, straight out of high school. You know, we want to encourage new farming. And so again, you know, these programs do help you out with that. So pivoting toward the management and conservation programs that the Farm Service Agency have, they have a slew of them. They have quite a bit. So one of them is the Non-Crop Disaster Assistance Program. It's called NAP for short. And actually here in Southwest Missouri, we have a lot of people that go through this. These are people that are eligible because they have specialty crops. They might have raspberries or blueberries or blackberries. They might have, you know, honey production and have, you know, a bee yard of many hives. This includes Christmas trees as well. These are specialty crops that you can't really find insurance for. And in many cases, at least here, is that if you are a historically underserved farmer, the NAP insurance is free, so as well. So which is good. So again, these are typically, you know, tailored towards smaller market garden operations. And so again, the NAP program is very popular for you know, these smaller operations. Another conservation management program that we have that is very, very popular, especially in the areas of Nebraska and Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, where we have a lot of farm cropland, is the Conservation Reserve Program, CRP for short. And so this is very popular throughout the Midwest and the Great Plains area. This is where you have long-term rental agreement for land. Basically, the owner, the operator, is setting aside land, and the government pays them a yearly rental rate to keep it, you know, natural. Basically, not to farm it. And so these are for areas or lands that are highly erodible, okay, and or that are very environmentally sensitive. And so these are areas such as floodplains, areas along streamside places, as well as water drainage ways as well. You know, back during the Mississippi floods of the early 1990s, you know, this really taught us that, you know what, we need to really kind of restore and sustain, if you will, and not farm right up to the Mississippi River, right up next to a river where crops get washed out, where erosion occurs and deposition occurs in the Gulf of Mexico. We don't need that. And so this program really is designed to address those issues as well. And then, of course, the Farm Service Agency also has programs for natural disasters. And so one of them is the ECP program, which is the Emergency Conservation Program. This is where, you know, the government basically, you know, helps pay for and to restore practices that were destroyed due to a natural disaster. It could be a flood, it could be a tornado, it could be a hurricane. And so typically when something like this occurs, that's what happens. This is what is going to occur in Kentucky here shortly. due to all the flooding that occurred in Kentucky. So this is like, replacing and paying for fences that were blown out to a flood or to a tornado. It also includes practices for droughts as well. So back in 10 years ago, back in 2012, when we had the Midwest drought, this was utilized to provide watering for pastures and for livestock, because all the ponds dried up. So the government provided money to drill wells, and so a lot of farmers were able to get a sustained and justified water source that would provide water for them in future droughts as well. There's another program here as well called the Livestock Forage Disaster Program. Actually, this is what our local counties here in Southwest Missouri are implementing today. Because we went through a drought this summer, they are helping to compensate landowners that have livestock to help pay for hay and feed that they had to buy due to this drought. So since the grass all burnt up, they had to buy hay, they had to buy grain, but it was at an elevated cost. And so the federal government came in and they enacted this LFP program because of our drought. And so we have hundreds of people coming into our office here in Springfield, Missouri, just to report their losses and to get money to help compensate the losses that they incurred due to feed. And there's also a smaller program too called the Emergency Assistance for Livestock. And this covers, it's called ELAP for short. And so we have a couple producers that are involved in this, especially honey producers. So this compensates for livestock due to disease or adverse weather. So, and this has happened before, excuse me, where a tornado might occur and livestock might be killed, or lightning strikes and it kills some cattle. Those cattle can be compensated through this program, through landowners, as well as I said before, honeybees, okay, because CCD, colony collapse disorder, is such a big issue. This is something that a lot of bee producers that own aviaries and manage aviaries will come into, because they might lose 50% of their hives. And so that is, of course, a big economic and labor investment for them, but the government does help out for that as well. So it's a lot of things that we don't really think about, okay? So again, with the Farm Service Agency, there are many, many different programs, and these are just, I think, 6 or 7 that I just touched upon, okay? And there are certain triggers for them. It could be a drought, it could be a natural disaster, it could be a flood or what have you. But again, you can learn more about them if you go to your local Farm Service Agency office, and they can tell you more about the eligibility requirements of those, as well as what they're utilized for too. So that's the Farm Service Agency. Now, what I want to talk about here shortly is what we do at the Natural Resources Conservation Service. So we implement and help with conservation programs. And our bread and butter program that we basically work with throughout the United States is the Environmental Quality Incentive Program, the EQIP program for short. And so what this does is this helps to financially fund structural and management conservation practices for you as the operator or as the owner of that property. So this might include developing a grazing system, where we want to establish a grazing system for rotational grazing. If you have sheep, if you have goats, if you have horses, if you have cattle, that's very good, okay? So the government will, help fund a fencing system, be it electric fencing, be it barbed wire fencing, be it woven wire fencing, as well as a watering system, which might include a well, which will include livestock pipelines, which includes water tanks as well. So here in Southwest Missouri, we do a lot of these grazing systems, and they're very, very popular as well. In the cropland areas of northern Missouri, Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, the cropland practices that are employed, include terraces, drainage waterways, precision farming, intricate, as well as, pesticide application, different things like that as well. So again, if you live in a cropland area, again, it's best to contact your local NRCS office and see what programs, practices are offered through them, through this EQIP program. We also offer many forest management practices. We don't really think about that. So if somebody has 40 acres of forest land, of timber, that's still an agricultural commodity, okay? Because it might be utilized for wildlife. Even though you might not be cutting down those trees for lumber, it's still an agricultural commodity. And so there are practices that we have, be it timber stand improvement, be it forest trails and landings, that can be utilized to enhance and sustain the succession, if you will, of that forest land. So there's plenty of practices in the forestry track as well. Also, too, when it comes to wildlife, we have practices that help you purchase trees, to plant trees and shrubs and wildflowers. Not only for pollinator habitat, but, specific pollinators. Here in the Midwest, we have an initiative for the establishment of pollinators specifically for the monarch butterfly, since this is the zone that they travel from Mexico up into Canada. And so, that's not applicable in the Northeast, it's not applicable in the West, but because of our location here in the Midwest, we have a specific monarch butterfly a practice to establish pollinator habitat, but just not for that species, but we do it for bees. We work with a lot of producers that produce honey, and so we help them establish wildflower tracts that provide food throughout the year for their honeybees, be it from early or late February all the way to November during the pollination season, if you will. Also, too, we also have programs for high tunnels to extend the growing season of certain crop operations, as well as compost facilities for smaller farms and urban farms too. So again, I'm just touching on some basic practices that we offer, that we work with when it comes to landowners as well. And so I just want to show you some pictures because, I can easily talk all day and talk about things that don't make sense, but, a picture is worth 1,000 words, as you well know. And so this is a project that I worked on many years ago. And this is a typical pasture that you see in Southwest Missouri that's unmanaged, okay? It doesn't have any infrastructure. The livestock were watering from the creek here. And as you can see, the creek is full of algae. You can see that there's erosion here as well. You can also see that, the pasture is overgrazed too. And so again, what we did with this piece of property is we worked with the landowner to put in fence, a watering system with water tanks as well. And we also fenced out the creek. But we made sure that the livestock had reliable water by drilling a well. And one of the basic practices that we did is we just planted trees, little seedlings of different species of trees and shrubs along the stream bank to keep that soil in place. And if you look at this, this is the cedar tree here, but 7 years later, that's what it looks like. Okay, you can see that cedar tree right there, but you can see the willows have come in. You can see that there's a different variety of different trees and shrubs and different species there. And so we were able to, again, protect their water quality. We were able to enhance wildlife. I mean, the birds just came back like no other, as well as all the other different types of fish and aquatic wildlife too. And most importantly for the operator is that, the livestock are out in the fields, okay? The livestock that we breed, especially here in the Midwest, are an economic resource. there to gain weight. And so instead of the cows loafing in the creek, they're out in the pasture eating. Okay. And so is what they're doing and gaining weight. And so this is a win-win situation from an environmental and from an economic perspective as well. And as you can see, I think for for the younger generation, if you have kids or grandkids, I think you would want, again, your kids, exploring and not playing in this area because that would be a bore to them. But I think they would have more fun, if you will, in terms of a quality of life issue, to be in this area as well. So again, this is a win-win situation. Very simple practices that we work with operators here at the NRCS. So again, grazing systems are things that we do. We come up with a plan. We look at the property. We assess it. The plan is really yours. Since you are the owner, the operator, you are the decision makers. We just provide the technical expertise and recommendations. And that's what we're doing here when we come up with these plans also. And as you can see here, forage management is very important. Again, EQIP helps to pay for a watering system, for water tanks, for fencing, for seed, so you have better forages, because again, we want to enhance that whole system of your farming operation. It's very, very important. And of course, especially in an area such as Missouri, you have a lot of cattle, you have a lot of livestock. And again, we want to manage that ground so it's nutritious for them to gain weight, but also too that it's not being overgrazed and the resource concerns are not being degraded as well. So again, this is just one aspect of grazing management systems. Another one that we work with just throughout the United States as well are high tunnels, whether you might be in the Northeast, the Northwest, the Southwest, or what have you. High tunnels are very, very popular, very, very important as well, especially when it comes to farmers markets, because you can produce crops throughout the year. And high tunnels are just structures here, okay? But we can, and it's very important for me to emphasize this, is that we're not here just to build you a fence and pay for it. We're addressing a resource concern. We have to justify the tax dollars that's being spent on these things, that they have a resource concern, okay? Be it erosion, be it a crop failure, be it keeping the water clean. We have to justify that, and we can with these practices. So high tunnels are very important. And some of you may have worked with numerous high tunnels in the past as well, because again, they help extend the growing season of crops. They deter frost failure of the crop system itself. And again, it provides an economic benefit to the landowner, and it gets that food into the food chain supply, which is very important. And we see this nationally, that it's very important. People want to eat local food, okay? They don't want to buy lettuce from South America where it travels thousands of miles, or if they don't want to purchase livestock food from 1,000 miles away, be it Mexico, be it California, or somewhere else. They want to buy local. That's very, very important. No doubt about that. So as you can see here, these high tunnels are very, very beneficial. You can produce a lot of crops in them that can be, that can go to the farmers markets. And of course, this is one of our favorite landowners that we work with. He is a historically underserved landowner. He came from Venezuela about 6 years ago, and he has 6 high tunnels. And what he produces, he sells everything to a local school district for their food lunch program. And then he also sells it to a local farmers market, as well as to local market chains and supermarkets as well. And of course, those are his tomatoes in August. And of course, I come across all the different variety of landowners. This is one of my favorite landowners that I work with. This is actually her mother, but they're from China, and so they produce a lot of Chinese and Asian vegetables that they can sell at specific markets. And of course, people love a diversity of produce. There's no doubt about that. But what they really love about it, especially her parents, is that they can go into the high tunnel in the middle of winter and meditate, play their Chinese instruments, and warm up. So they really enjoy that as well. So, we as servants of the government, we love to see examples like this because, again, we love to help the people out. No doubt about that. What are some other practices that we use? Well, agroforestry is one. We don't really think about agroforestry products, but nut production, timber production, berry production is very, very important. And so some states, some regions have practices for agroforestry, for establishing certain species. And in this case, this is for elderberries. Okay, elderberries are very high in antioxidants, and so they're very popular as well. And so this is a landowner that has some cropland, and they let it go back to grass, but we're able to fund bushes for them, and also the geotextile, so they could basically grow elderberries. So this is just 2 years after this picture was taken, and you can see you can see the elderberry blossoms as well. And so these are harvested and sold as well. So very, very popular. But also too, there's other sorts of berries and nut producing trees, raspberries, blackberries, black walnuts, pecans, those all fall under, the agroforestry practices that we work with as well. So again, these are very successful also.
Hey, Adam.
Yes.
I'm going to interrupt you really quick because EQIP is so popular with people. Everyone wants to know how they can get a high tunnel. And I think this is a good opportunity to explain a little bit.
Okay.
Like, is EQIP a grant?
Yes.
Like, can you explain how the cost share kind of works for that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what occurs with the EQIP program, and high tunnels are very, very popular. No doubt about that. Is this an application process? So what you do is you go to your local NRCS office or call them up, and you tell them, hey, I'm very interested in the high tunnel program. And so the high tunnel program has some eligibility requirements. And so one of them is that it has to be on area that's already cultivated. It might change, but for the most part, it's going to be your garden, or it could be a larger area. And so it's an application. So what occurs is that each state gets, so much money from the federal government each year through EQIP. Here in Missouri, we might get $5 million in the state of Missouri, okay, for our EQIP program. And so what we have to do is that maybe 25% goes toward pasture practices. 30% might go toward cropland practices. 5% might go to wildlife practices. 20% might go to forestry practices. For high tunnels, this last year, we had 400 applications for high tunnels throughout the state of Missouri. Unfortunately, there wasn't that much money in our federal government last year. And so we were only able to fund around maybe 50 high tunnels out of 400. We were very disappointed. And so the application process is free. That's what we do. I'm your project manager, or somebody else will be your project manager. And so the application process is free. And so what we have to do is we have to, if you will, treat everyone equally. So out of those 400 applications, we had to assess and answer questions upon those. And so the people that scored the highest were the first ones to get in through that funding. And so the money isn't guaranteed, but even if you don't get in, you're automatically signed up for the next fiscal year to apply again. So I know this sounds confusing or so, but But if you work with somebody like myself, we can explain it to you in further and greater detail as well. But the application process is free. And if you are accepted into the program, if there's enough money there for you, what occurs is you get paid so much per square foot for that high tunnel. So if you have 1,800 square feet of cultivated land and you want an 1,800 square foot high tunnel, the government pays, I think, around $4.10 per square foot. And so that equates somewhere to maybe $8,000 or so. That will help offset the cost for equip for that high tunnel that you are purchasing. So the government doesn't purchase the materials for you. We pay you, once you put it up, we pay you an incentive payment. And typically that incentive payment ranges around anywhere from 50% to 95% of the cost of the materials and of the labor. And so I guess to make a long story short, it helps to offset those costs for you. Okay, it's an incentive payment, so it's not a grant, and the process is free, is what it is. But again, I want to encourage you again to go to your local NRCS office to learn more about that. The same goes for all the different other practices, be it fence, being it a water tank. We have a certain cost rate of what that is. Now, if as Jennifer talked about, if you're a historically underserved farmer, which means if you're a beginning farmer, if you're a socially disadvantaged farmer, if you're a veteran farmer or a limited resource farmer, that incentive payment rate is going to be higher than the typical traditional farmer, if you will. So historically underserved farmers get a higher payment rate. And again, that really helps to offset the costs for implementing these practices.
Thank
So
you so much. Yeah,
I hope that made sense there and everything. So I know it's confusing.
Thank you.
But again, we're here to help you out and have it make sense with you, because we do this on a day in and day out basis.
And that application window for Equip, does that reopen in November?
It does, but you can apply anytime throughout the year. So the application process is open anytime, and so we can sign you up. But usually there's a deadline here in the state of Missouri for the fiscal year 2023 EQIP program. The deadline will probably be in mid-November is when it will be. So, and all it is just you signing an application. We're not trying to sell you a vacuum or a timeshare. And so, you're not signing your life away when it comes to things like that. We make sure that does not happen for you at all.
All right. Thank you, Adam. You can continue.
Okay, great. So just some other practices too that we talk about are, pollen and nectar production as well. And so we work with a lot of aviaries. And so, so we establish, if you will, a variety of different wildflowers, not only for monarch butterflies, but for bees and just for general insects as well. But again, it's very valuable, for farmers. And we don't really think of aviaries as farmers, but they are. We don't think about a 10-acre tract of forest land as being a farmer, but you are, okay, if you own 10 acres of wooded land. So, because again, we're addressing resource concerns that deal with animals. It could be livestock, it could be deer, it could be, sheep or goats. We also deal with erosion issues. So we look at everything when it comes to your land, okay, and all the different resource concerns. So soil, water, air, livestock, everything that you can think of. And so one of the things that I do want to talk about here before I end is that one of the things that we're doing nationally is we're looking at urban areas because we know that urban areas are an underserved land use or a region where agriculture can be produced. It's very, very important. And we're seeing that more and more, especially in larger municipalities or metropolitan areas. We're seeing more urban gardens. Springfield Community Gardens is a perfect example. And so we're seeing them in larger cities, Chicago, New York, Boston, and so forth. Okay, where people want locally grown food. It's a social benefit, it's an environmental benefit, and it's a commodity benefit too. And so this is a new thing that our agency is really pushing. And because for the last 50 years, 100 years, we've worked with the larger agricultural tracts of land, okay, corn, soybean, and so forth. But now we're branching off into urban areas because we know the value of local farmers markets and locally grown food. And so here in the state of Missouri, we are looking at different practices that could be implemented for smaller farms, okay? And some of the ones, of course, that we talked about are high tunnels. High tunnels, of course, are very important, and there's a great interest in that. One thing that we don't really think about either are composting facilities as well. And so composting facilities are very important, okay? And so this is your typical, and if you live on a farm or if you live in a metropolitan suburban area, you might already have a composting bin. And so we really want to increase soil health and address soil health, especially to your garden or for others to use it as well. And so we're really looking into the funding opportunities and the applicability issues of how we can get these implemented, regionally and also nationwide as well. And so, we look at, backyard bins to even larger facilities that can be used on site also. One thing I do want to point out here is I was looking through the list of attendees, and of course, one of my good friends and co-workers who no longer works with me. His name is Brian Andrews. He's a participant. Brian is an NRCS employee, and I used to work with Brian a couple years ago. That's before he moved to Connecticut and is working at the state office there as a NRCS program specialist. And I was chatting with Brian, and again, he's working on some urban agricultural issues as well in New England, and he's on a team too. And so I'm going to be meeting with Brian here later this week because he's originally from this area, but he's coming back home here in a couple days. But Brian, feel free to interject or so. I've worked with Brian for years. Of course, is this something applicable, Brian, that that you see as well in the Northeast United States too? I know I'm putting you on the spot, Brian. I don't know if you can talk or not, but
I don't think panelists or
only the panelists can. Okay, that's good. Yeah. That's good. Okay,
but so he can type in the chat if he'd like.
Oh, he can type in. That's very good. That's very good. So I appreciate that, Brian. So I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I saw Brian's name, and again, he's a great resource contact out there. So even Jennifer, I know that you're in Massachusetts, but Brian's a good friend of mine, and I saw him on the participant list here too as well.
Sounds good.
But just to kind of end things, the NRCS does other programs, such as the Conservation Stewardship Program. This is more of a long-term contract where we encourage landowners to enhance practices or use enhancements to management their land. This is usually the second step, if you will, after EQIP when it comes to working on a farming operation. I didn't want to talk about this too much because there's a lot more to it, but really EQIP, especially for beginning farmers, for funding your farm, EQIP's really the first step that you want to look at. Another one is the Agricultural Management Assistance Program. And this is really only relegated to 16 states in the United States. And so we don't really have it here in Missouri or Arkansas or Kansas. But this is one that has also been very popular in the Northeast. There's a couple states in the West that are in this program too, but this helps to diversify practices, to look at marketing and also risk management too. So there are other programs that we work on when it comes to conservation. And again, every region is different. Every state is different. And so again, don't hesitate, to contact one of our offices, and we'll make sure we sit down with you and convey this information with you as well. Because really, what the purpose is, and I love this photograph. This is from one of my favorite landowners here. This is her daughter. And so, her daughter is being raised on a farm. And her daughter loves playing with worms, loves playing with compost, loves playing in the high tunnel as well. And it always brings joy to my heart when I go out to visit this particular landowner, and I see her daughter running around, because really that's what we want is we want to create a new generation of farmers, and for them to learn that background. So 40 years from now, 30 years, 50 years from now, these future generations will still have that information and have that knowledge and have the heart for farming, be it on an urban area or be it on the most rural area as well. That's what we're looking for too. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and in my presentation here, I'm going to turn it back over to Anna. And again, feel free to chat any questions or any information that you might have. We'll be sure we get back with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very sweet picture and a nice end cap to your presentation there. And so really quick, before we get to Q&A, because we do have quite a few questions in there, I dropped a link to the Farmer's Guide to USDA Farm Bill programs in the chat. And I just wanted to zoom in on it really quick. If I can move these controls. So this makes it super easy for you to see what is available, because again, I think a very difficult hurdle for people to overcome is just knowing like what help is out there. It's simple when you know about it, but if you don't know, you can't use it. So it's a very easy brochure, and you can see here on the side, like the farm operating loans we talked about, farm ownership loans, all of those handy things. And then also the USDA has tried to make it really easy for you. I'm going to put this link into the chat as well, but they have a farm loan discovery tool, which is super simple. You can walk through it, answer some really basic questions about who you are, where you live, and then it will direct you toward certain funding programs that will be applicable to you. And then we would be remiss not to say hello. SCG is here to support you. Please feel free to reach out to us. If you do have questions or are in the Springfield area and want a little bit of help getting started or just talking through your plans, we also help people with things starting from business planning, getting your hands dirty. If you don't have any agricultural experience yet, we have internship programs, an apprenticeship program to help you learn more about farming and see if it's the right career for you. And then, oh, how does this, there we go. So yes, I'm going to put these resources into the chat. Thank you, Adam, for talking about the FSA, NRCS. We also have the Missouri Department of Agriculture that has a lot of really valuable programs. I just want to mention a couple so that you know, and again, if you're interested in them, happy to talk about them further. The Food Insecure Urban Agriculture Matching Grant. So this one has a deadline coming up. It is for producers in urban areas, and it is basically a reimbursement of expenses that you have already incurred or plan to incur. But the idea is that you are helping address food insecurity in your area. And I put some examples down here because it's supposed to, help the whole community. So funds may be used to increase food production, increase your local economic impact. There are a lot of ways that you can write the grant. So again, if you need help, reach out to us for help. The Missouri Department of Agriculture also typically offers a specialty crop block grant. We hope that it will be offered again next round of funding. And this is available to a wide variety of people, institutions, and basically they want you to focus on specialty crops. So that's not cattle, not dairy. It's like the produce that you might be growing in your backyard or on your farm. And basically you're, again, just trying to enhance the specialty crop industry. So increase people's understanding of it, their consumption of specialty crops. You can get creative with this as well. They also have the urban agriculture matching grant, and there is time to this. The deadline is in September, and it requires 25% of costs that you cover. Like any of the matching programs basically require, they will put up a certain amount of money, but you also have to put up some cash as well, cash or in kind. So that's how matching programs work. And this kind of explains what those funds can be used for. Eligible expenses include your equipment, materials, business planning, marketing, a lot of that kind of stuff. They don't want to pay for salaries or payroll, some of those overhead costs, unfortunately. But the Missouri Department of Agriculture does offer a ton of really great programs that allow, I think, for a little bit more creativity. If you have a mission on your farm where you're really trying to educate people, feed people, or if you have some special projects, there's probably something that you can apply for that fits your farm. Honorable mentions that, like I said, we don't have it to get into, but there are energy efficiency grants. If you are in a school district with an agricultural facility, then you can apply for these grants to help reduce the energy usage. We also have a value added grant. So value added means you're taking a produce or a product from your farm and you're making it into a jam, a jelly, a seasoning salt. You're making something from it. And so if you are curious about that, you've been thinking about it, but you're not sure if it's the right idea, this grant can pay for exploring that idea with a third party to develop the idea, see if there's a market for it, see how exactly you would go about doing it. So that could be very helpful as well. There's also a farm to table grant. And this basically, we are trying to get locally grown products bought from small farmers into Missouri schools. I believe the Missouri Grown program that some of you might be familiar with, they do something like that as well. We're trying to get more fresh, wonderful produce and products onto the lunch plates of our school children. So that's very important. Okay, I ran through that really quickly. So thank you for bearing with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second. And we do have several questions. So the first one goes to Jennifer. Jennifer, how do you set yourself or your farm apart from others when you're writing these grants?
Yeah, I think the best advice there is to just tell your story. I mean, I think, everybody's got, some personal passion of like, what drew you to farming? Why are you motivated to do it? What is unique about your business model? Who do you serve? Who's your community? What are some of the special things that you do to engage the public or community or youth or whatever it may be? If you have a social mission or purpose of some kind associated with your farm, or maybe you're growing unique varieties of products that other farmers aren't doing, maybe you practice sustainable practices. Generally, most people have something that they're offering that you can describe that, it may not be fundamentally different, but if you can tell your story in a compelling way, then the reviewers of the grants can hopefully understand why you're worthy of investment and why, again, this will make a difference to you and how it will help you continue to serve your customers, how it'll help you be more economically viable, and how you'll sustain yourself, your business, and the services that you're providing to the land and your community moving forward. So I think if you hit all those points, hopefully that helps outweigh your farm over another. And again, going back to those review criteria, you may not even be the best farm, but if you write the best proposal because you really met all of those review criteria solidly, sometimes that happens. I've been disappointed many times writing very good quality grants, but someone else may have like said a few words here or there and gotten more points because maybe I missed it. That happens.
I mean, everyone is an individual. Everyone has their own story and the reason for doing, this very hard work. So yeah, thinking about that and making yourself stating yourself and why you're doing it. That's a lovely idea. And Adam, thank you. I saw you answered one of our questions,
Right.
which I think is super important. It's a very unique situation. Someone was asking about if you live in a mobile home park where you own the home but do not own the land, is there a program where you're able to connect landowners that may allow leasing or using this unused land, so you don't own the land, but you somehow have access to it? Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. You bet. Yeah, Equip allows that. So if and then we've had situations like that where maybe a business or a organization might own land. And so if they give you permission to do that, and it's usually we have kind of a formatted lease agreement that we use. If they sign off on it saying, we give, farmer Jane Doe, permission to utilize this 5 acres to grow crops for the next 5 years, really that's all we need. And so to apply for the EQIP program. So because that's the agreement between you two. And from that, we can, again, you'd be eligible to apply for those different practices as well. So we're non-regulatory. So we just try to keep agreements between you as an operator and a landowner, in between that. So, but if you come to agreement and we see a document, we're good with that. So as well.
Very good. And then when does the next farm bill come out?
Well, you can answer that, Jennifer. So because you keep a close eye on it.
That's a perfect segue. I did want to mention that too. So everyone in the farm policy world is gearing up for hopefully a 2023 farm bill. So the farm bill is usually written every 5 years. Sometimes it doesn't quite go as planned if Congress doesn't agree or come to consensus on moving that forward. But I think the policy folks are, hoping that will be the case, that next year. There's been a lot of planning and grassroots advocacy work happening on the ground over the last year. And I did want to say, relevant to this conversation tonight and all the information that Adam has shared about these federal programs, if you consistently feel like these programs don't fit you or your operation, like that's a great opportunity to engage in advocacy and education with both agency folks, but also your legislators. There are a lot of grassroots policy groups across the country and the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition that are trying to have been hosting and do listen to farmers about how these programs work or don't work for them. We've hosted a listening session with a lot of our NRCS and FSA folks in urban areas because sometimes the programs just don't quite fit smaller growers or other things, and they want to hear that so that hopefully they can learn how to adapt the programs, or potentially down the road policymakers can change the legislative authority or the scope of some of the programs to better fit the type of production that you may want to do. So I definitely encourage you to get involved and to weigh in, pay attention, advocate for things that will benefit you, maybe discourage things with your legislators that don't benefit you, whatever the case may be. It's an education process, and there's opportunities to engage, so take advantage of it.
Great advice, thank you. And just to confirm, yes, along with this recording, I will be collecting the many links and resources that we've talked about in a follow-up email, so be on the lookout for that this week. And then Adam, I see that you're already starting to address this, but can the matching for those urban ag matching grants come from an FSA or NRCS loan?
Yeah, actually through an FSA loan, they can. We don't do loans ourselves, um, but yes, some people will go through the FSA loan program to get some money, to help them start off. But kind of as I alluded to before, I answered one of the questions. If you're a historically underserved farmer, if you are a beginning farmer, socially disadvantaged farmer, limited resource farmer, veteran farmer, that money is allowable now to get paid upfront to you to help cover the purchase costs and labor costs for implementing these conservation practices. And so because we saw years ago that there was a money flow issue for getting a lot of these practices on the ground. And so now over the last 2 years, they have allowed that historically underserved category to get that money up front to help pay for it. So which is a great benefit as well.
And I know some of that, like I said, there has to be a minimum amount of cash that you put up, but there is in-kind accepted for that as well, which includes donated services, volunteer hours, donated equipment and things like that. So,
well, yeah, through the EQIP program, from a matching standpoint, there really isn't, but through some of the other grant programs,
the MDA, they accept some in-kind.
They do, yeah. And we have some grant programs as well. Like there's one called the Conservation Innovative Grant Program, CIG program as well. And so there's some flexibility with that and some different standards also. But again, I'd want to encourage you to again, talk to somebody at your local county office or your nearest USDA service center, to learn about more of these or so. And again, as I said before, they might seem intimidating at first, but that's what we've been working on for years. Again, we make sure we're not trying to again sell you that vacuum, sell you that timeshare. We don't want to get in any trouble. We want to put you at ease and really make you understand what programs are out there. And again, it can be Greek, but again, we try to keep it as simple as we can for you.
Thank you. And then someone's asking about ideas for funding for a person who acts in more of an educational role.
Mm-hmm.
Do all the funding options require owning or renting your land or having a farm, or someone's trying to start a business in farming in other people's backyards or teaching them how to start their own gardens?
Right.
So more of a community educator type of role.
Well, I think, and again, yours might be a little bit, and Jennifer, I'll have you, talk about your experience with that. From our experience, there really isn't through the NRCS programs or FSA programs, from an education outreach standard, we don't really have any of that. However, there are other agencies within the USDA that do provide grants for education and for community involvement, and Springfield Community Gardens has gone through is it the food and I forgot what agency it was in the USDA, NIF, I think I forgot.
Yeah, the National Institute for Food and Agriculture.
Yeah, NIF, so as well. And Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit maybe about that.
Yeah, I think it really depends. Any farm is certainly able to engage in education and community outreach and education about farming and gardening. So you don't necessarily have to be a nonprofit organization. You can be a for-profit business and still have a social mission and or programming that you offer as part of a for-profit business. So just to clarify that, sometimes people think, oh, I have to be an incorporated 501c3 nonprofit organization to be eligible. Certainly for some foundation grants or some federal grants or other things that are education focused, you may need to be a nonprofit. Sometimes you can also be a for-profit commercial farm business. So that's where the eligibility is key to understand that. And then within the USDA, if you are primarily training and education program, there are grant opportunities to provide training and education for beginning farmers and ranchers. There's the BFRDP program, the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program. There are the risk management agency programs that also do risk management education around all the areas of legal, production, marketing, human resource, and I forget what the other one, there's a bunch of different risk categories that almost anything you can think of falls into. Within the SARE, Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program that I mentioned, there's the farmer grants, but there are also partnership grants. There are research and education grants. There are novel approaches grants. So there's different grant categories that fund different activities. And within the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, there are also other community-based programs like the Community Food Projects grant program that funds grassroots organizations to really do community food to address food insecurity in the community through lots of different kinds of projects. And Springfield Community Gardens has gotten those grants. There are grants that serve and do veteran education to veterans in agriculture. There are grants that also help folks develop programming for urban agriculture, like the Urban Ag Project that we just talked about. There's planning grants, implementation grants. There's farm to school planning grants and farm to school implementation grants. So there's so many different things that are out there, but just to note too, a lot of them are very competitive. So you really do, again, have to pay attention to the review criteria, make sure you're eligible, write a compelling proposal. There are grant writing service organizations out there that can write federal grants and help you, figure out how to be competitive in those grant programs. So
I feel like even the specialty crop block grant program could apply in that situation if the person, like put up a website or put out more community resources. So along with the one-on-one help, like if you expanded that, you can say that you're promoting the entire, promoting specialty crops to the entire community. That could also be a good fit. And then, okay, going to piggyback off of something that I think we just brought up. We have a couple questions related to historically disadvantaged. Are there resources such as grants or incentive programs for farmers with disabilities, even if they are non-veterans? Like, do we specify farmers with disabilities as historically disadvantaged?
Yeah, not necessarily, but I know that Farm Service Agency, they have information about people with disabilities as well. And so it's, we haven't really, I've worked with disabled people, but they don't get a, there has not been a category yet that gives them any type of favor within any of these programs such as EQIP. However, I do know that there are programs through veterans that disabled veterans or through disabled farmers as well that are out there. And I apologize because I don't know the ins and outs of them at all, but I have seen some information that FSA has regarding that. I could look up that and look for some more information for you on that.
There is the USDA Agribility Program. I don't also know a lot about it, but I just dropped a link to Anna. So if you want to add it to the chat, there is information about how that's administered through Cooperative Extension and others, where there is programming to help provide support for people that may be injured in agriculture or have disabilities to help them continue their careers in agriculture. So that might be another source to look at and explore.
Absolutely. I will put that in the chat right now. Thank you. This is why you're the experts on this panel. We appreciate it. And then Adam, do you know, this might, I know you don't know all of the FSA ins and outs, but does the non-insured crop disaster assistance program cover drilling wells for water sources for specialty crops?
I believe not. I don't think it does. So really what the NAP program is for is really, for example, if you're growing vegetables, that are exposed to the elements, and a hailstorm comes in and destroys your lettuce crop, that would be covered underneath the NAP program. Things that are in a high tunnel, at least here in our area, are not covered by the NAP program because the high tunnel protects it, such as a frost, such as a hailstorm or so. I think if there's a tornado, that's going to roll over into a different program as well. But the NAP program is going to vary based upon state by state and based upon region. So because the Farm Service Agency is, if you will, directed and guided by local county committees. And so they have elections every year for committee members that directs, local county services. It provides a lot of decision making when it comes to the agricultural demographics, if you will, of what should be utilized, where the money should go, and so forth. And so, again, I would encourage you to talk to your local FSA office about that as well.
Okay. And then I believe the NCDA, so the crop disaster assistance program, does that assist with restocking fish that were killed by a drought or developing infrastructure that would prevent the drought from having such an impact again? So restocking on supporting the fish wildlife.
Right. Yeah, that's a great question. We've never had that situation here. Typically, that program is more of a reactive program, but also too, you want to deter things from occurring again. And so yes, the conservation practices, can be funded through, it's a replacement situation, but, EQIP and there's other programs that will help to, enhance and deter, things from like that happening again. For fish kills, that's a very good question. We've never really had it here at all. Because we don't deal a lot with aquaculture at all in this region. But that's something that we can definitely look into as well.
Okay. And then one more resource I'm going to drop into the chat. If you feel like you have been discriminated against, or there is, you'd like to file a complaint with the USDA, there's a link to do so as well. And for now, that's all of our questions. We went through a lot. So thank you so much, both of you, for your time. Thank you, everyone, for being here and asking your questions. It's hard for me to see since I'm the host, but I know typically with Zoom, option for you to download the chat. So if you wanted to save the questions from tonight, go ahead. I can't see how to explain to do that right now, but otherwise do not worry. Like I said, you will get everything sent back to you. And I really appreciate you all being here. Be on the lookout. We will post this to our Springfield Community Gardens YouTube channel in the next day or so. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Jennifer. And again, thank you for everyone that attended, because again, this makes us feel good. So to work with the local community or people from outside this region.
Yeah, and we need more farmers. So we hope you're all successful and get access to the resources that you need to continue to grow your success and feed your communities. So thank you for all the hard work you do. And thanks, Anna, for facilitating.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. All right, you guys have a good night.
Okay.
Bye-bye.